I was preparing lunch when I heard Hope talking on the phone with someone. My daughter was complaining about me as if I was not even there. "I know she's my mother, but I can't stand it anymore. Your mom, Doris, at least helps out with money," she yelled into the phone while I stirred the beans in the kitchen. When I turned off the stove, Hope came into the kitchen with a very unfriendly look on her face and a coldness in her eyes I had never seen before. "Mom, we already talked and made a decision. You are going to have to get out of here this week. Doris is coming back to stay in her room because she actually helps with the house expenses. You just spend money and contribute nothing." Her words hit me like a lightning bolt that came down from the sky. 30 years living in this house, raising my children, taking care of everything, and now I was just a heavy burden. I felt my heart break into tiny pieces, but I said absolutely nothing. Hope kept talking, becoming harder and colder with me. "Mom, did you hear what I said? You have 1 week to get your things. Doris is coming back this weekend, and she will need her room all to herself." I turned around slowly, still holding the wooden spoon I was stirring with. "Hope, honey, this is my house. Where do you want me to go?" She huffed impatiently, as if it were a very stupid question. "That's your problem. Find a boarding house, go to a relative's house, I don't know. I just know you can't stay here being a burden on our family anymore." David appeared at the kitchen door, nodding his head and completely supporting his wife. "It's better this way, Grace. The house is small, and my mom really needs to come back here." I went up to my room with trembling legs and a broken heart. I sat on the bed where I had slept next to my late husband, Michael, for 25 whole years. The walls had photos of my children when they were little, of the birthday parties I organized with so much love of the day. Hope got married right here in this house. How could she throw me out like that, as if I were a piece of old furniture cluttering up the living room? I grabbed a small suitcase and started putting some clothes inside. My hands were shaking so much I could barely fold the blouses correctly. 1 week to leave my own home. I had nowhere to go. I did not have much money saved, and at 60, 8 years old, who was going to welcome me with open arms. But what they did not know was that I still kept some very important secrets that Michael had left me before he passed. During those first terrible days, I stayed in a cheap boarding house downtown while I looked for a permanent place to live. The room smelled like damp mold, and the mattress sank terribly in the middle, but it was the only thing I could afford with the few resources I had saved. I would stay awake until very late, remembering when Hope was little and had awful nightmares. I would spend the entire night by her bed singing softly to her until she fell asleep, peaceful and calm. Where was that little girl who called me her little queen and said that when she grew up, she would take care of me forever and ever? What had happened to the love I was so sure existed between us? During that horrible and desperate week, I tried to call Hope several times in a row. When she answered, she was cold and very impatient with me. "Mom, I already told you there's no turning back. You need to accept your new situation and stop bothering me." I called my oldest son, Charles, who lives in another city far away. He listened to everything in complete silence and then sighed heavily. "Mom, I'd like to help, but Patricia doesn't want long-term visitors here at the house. You know how she is about those things. And even my own family had abandoned me when I needed them most in my life. I walked through the streets of the city where I was born, where I got married, where I raised my children, and I felt like a complete stranger, totally lost. It was on Friday when I ran into my neighbor Anthony at the bakery that I discovered something that changed everything completely and forever." "Grace, what a surprise to see you here. How are things going at the house?" I hesitated a great deal before answering. "Oh, Anthony, I'm staying away from the house these days." He looked very confused and puzzled. "That's strange, because your daughter Hope told me yesterday that you had gone to spend some time with relatives and that they were going to take the opportunity to do some remodeling on the house. I even saw her marking things up with some contractors." My blood ran cold in that moment. Hope was spreading lies to all the neighbors, making up stories about remodeling and relatives, when in reality, she just wanted to hide me from the community that had known me forever. If she was lying so shamelessly about this, what other things was she plotting behind my back without me knowing? In that exact moment, something inside me finally broke for good. It was not pain. It was not anger. It was a cold crystal clarity of someone who can finally see the whole truth. That night in my little room at the boarding house, I took out a small box that I always carried with me everywhere. Inside were some very important papers that Michael had given me many years ago. "Grace, if you ever need total independence, use this," he had told me with so much love. At the time, I did not really understand what he meant. Now I understood perfectly the care my husband had always taken with me. Michael was always a man who planned ahead, and he was still protecting me even after leaving this world. He had saved things I did not even know existed. existed, documents that could change everything if I decided to use them correctly. The next day, very early, I got up, took a slow bath, put on my best dress, and left the boarding house carrying only a small bag. I had some very important things to do before that week ended. First, I went to the bank where Michael had a special account that I barely knew about. The manager received me with all the politeness in the world, and after reviewing my papers and a special key Michael had left me, she took me to a private office for important clients. What I saw on the computer screen left me completely speechless and breathless. Michael had been saving money in that account for over 20 whole years without me knowing a single thing. There were more than $200,000 saved in addition to some investments that had grown very well over all these years. Grace, your husband left very clear instructions when he opened this account. This money was for you to use only if you needed protection or total independence from the family, the manager explained to me with great delicacy. I smiled for the first time in weeks. My Michael was always a man who planned ahead and continued to protect me even after he had departed from this world. I left the bank and went straight to the county recorder's office. I had some very important documents to verify with great urgency. For the next 2 weeks, I did everything in complete silence and with extreme care. I hired a discreet and very experienced lawyer, organized all the important papers for the house, and planned every move with the precision of a skilled surgeon. Hope kept calling from time to time, always with that cold, distant tone that hurt me so much. You're used to the boarding house now, right, Mom? It's better this way. Here at the house, everything is getting organized very well. I just said yes and hung up quickly. I had nothing more to talk to her about anyway. On the day we had agreed upon, I got up very early, took a long bath, put on my best clothes, and left the boarding house carrying only a small suitcase. The time had come to take the final definitive step. And when they returned from their outing that afternoon, they were going to discover that some decisions in life definitely have no turning back. Hope, David, and Doris returned from their trip to the mall loaded with bags and laughing very loudly. They had made good use of the money they were now saving by not having to worry about me at all. Doris was radiant, all dressed up, finally settled in the room she had wanted for so long. But when they reached the street where the house was, they saw something that left them in complete shock. There was a huge "Sold" sign nailed to the front gate and a moving truck parked right at the curb. Hope dropped all her bags on the ground and ran desperately to the door, trying to open it with her key, but the lock had been completely changed to a new one. "What the hell is going on here?" she screamed hysterically at the man who was carrying furniture out. "The owner, Grace, sold the house, ma'am. Today was the last day to get her personal things out." I appeared at the door at that exact moment, personally supervising the removal of my belongings. Hope saw me and came running like a crazy person. "Mom, what did you do? Have you gone completely insane?" I looked at her with total and absolute calm. "I did exactly what you wanted, Hope. I got out of your life forever." I showed her all the documents that proved the house had always been mine, registered only in my name since we bought it. Your father was very smart. He knew that one day I might need protection from my own family. David tried to argue, completely desperate. "But Grace, where are we going to live? Our whole life is in there." I smiled with a coldness that even I did not recognize in myself. "That's a question you should have asked yourselves before you threw me out onto the street like an abandoned dog." David tried to argue, his voice trembling with total desperation. "But Grace, where are the three of us going to live now? Our entire life is in here. And my mom, she left everything in her life to come live here." I smiled with a coldness I no longer recognized in myself. "That important question is one you should have asked yourselves before you threw me out onto the street like an abandoned dog. Let Doris figure it out on her own, exactly like you told me to figure it out on my own." I got into the car I had called, carrying only a small suitcase and my usual purse. Hope ran after the car like a desperate person, screaming, begging, and sobbing loudly, but I did not even look back once. The neighbors had all come out to see the commotion and were whispering among themselves, very impressed. Anthony waved at me from his window with a big smile of approval on his face. I had bought a small but very comfortable apartment in another city, already furnished and completely ready for me to live peacefully. All the money from the sale of the house was secured and well, invested in the bank, along with the special inheritance that my Michael had left me with so much love. For the first time in many, many months, I felt completely free, breathing deeply and looking at the road ahead of me. They wanted me to disappear from their lives forever, so that is exactly what I did. In these first few days of my new life, I have discovered a peace I had not known for many, many years. I no longer have to walk on eggshells in my own home. I no longer have to listen to complaints about my presence. I am no longer a burden to anyone. My apartment is small, but it is completely mine. Every piece of furniture, every plate, every decision is mine alone. When I want to watch TV, I watch whatever I feel like. When I want to cook, I prepare exactly what I am in the mood to eat. In the afternoons, I go for a walk in the nearby park, and I chat with ladies who, like me, learned that family is not always what you expect it to be. Last night, the phone rang many times in a row. It was Hope, but I have nothing left to talk to her about. I let it ring until it got tired, and then I poured myself a calming chamomile tea. Tomorrow, I am going to start painting classes at the community center that is nearby. The lady who helped me sign up said there are many women my age who are discovering new talents after 60. I am very excited about the idea of learning something completely new, something that is just for me without having to worry about what anyone else thinks or says. Tonight, before falling asleep, I looked out the window at the stars shining over my new city. Michael, if you are watching me from heaven, thank you for taking care of me even after you left. Thank you for teaching me that it is never too late to choose our own dignity. Hope thought she was punishing me by kicking me out of the house. What she did not know was that she was giving me the freedom I had not dared to take for myself. Sometimes the best blessings come disguised as the most painful betrayals. 3 weeks have passed since I moved into my new apartment, and every morning I wake up without the knot in my stomach that had been with me for the last few years. But the nights are different. In the stillness of my new home, the memories come like waves I cannot stop. Last night, while organizing my few belongings, I found a box of photographs I had managed to get out of the house before selling it. There was Hope at 5 years old with her messy pigtails and that smile that lit up the whole house when she saw me arrive from work. Back then, I worked double shifts at the textile factory to support my 2 children after Michael had that accident at the construction site, which left him unable to work for almost 2 whole years. I would leave the house at 5 in the morning and return after 8 at night completely exhausted, but always with enough energy to check my kids' homework, to prepare them something hot for dinner, to listen to everything that had happened in their day. Hope always waited up for me in the living room, even if it was very late. "Mommy, you're home? I saved you a drawing I made in school," she would say, running into my tired arms. Those hugs gave me the strength to get up the next day and do it all over again. I look at that photograph now and wonder when exactly my little girl turned into that cold woman who threw me out of the house as if I were an annoying stranger. Was it when she married David and he started filling her head with ideas about what a modern family should be? Was it when they had their own children and decided there was no longer room for grandma in their perfect lives? Or maybe it was more gradual, so slow that I did not notice until it was already too late to do anything about it. I remember perfectly the day Hope came home after her honeymoon, radiant and full of plans for the future. Mommy, David, and I were thinking it would be best if we stayed here for a while until we save up money for our own house, she told me with that smile I knew so well. Of course I said yes. She was my daughter. She had just gotten married, and I had plenty of space in the house since Charles had moved to Ohio with his family. Of course, honey. This is your house too for as long as you need, I replied with all the love in the world. David seemed like a good guy back then. Hardworking, respectful, always calling me Grace with great politeness. The first few months were really nice. We had dinner together every night. We talked about their jobs, about their dreams of having a big, happy family. I helped them with the house expenses, of course, but they never saw it as an obligation. It was natural for all of us to contribute according to our means. Hope still hugged me when I got home from work. She still asked me how my day had been. She still called me, my dear mommy, when she needed something. But little by little, so slowly, I almost did not notice things began to change in very subtle ways. First, it was David who started making comments about how outdated some family traditions were. "Grace, you don't need to get up so early to make breakfast for everyone anymore. We can manage on our own," he would tell me with a smile that did not quite reach his eyes. Then it was the small decisions about the house. "Mommy, David, and I think it would be better to change the living room furniture. The ones we have look very old." Hope would inform me. She no longer asked for my opinion. She simply told me what they had decided between themselves. The most painful change came when the grandchildren were born. Hope first had Lucy, a beautiful baby girl, who became the light of my eyes from the very first moment. I immediately offered to take care of her, while Hope went back to work after her maternity leave. "Don't worry, Mommy. We're going to hire a professional to take care of the baby. It's better that way," Hope told me with a coldness that chilled my heart. A professional. What could be more professional than the love of a grandmother who had successfully raised 2 children? 2 years later, Peter arrived, a beautiful, energetic boy who also completely stole my heart. But by then, the rules were already very clear in the house. I could see my grandchildren, I could play with them occasionally, but the important decisions about their upbringing, their education, their activities, all of that was decided solely by Hope and David. I had become a renter in my own home, someone who was tolerated, but whose opinion no longer held any real value. During all these years, I tried to adapt to this new reality without complaining too much. I told myself it was normal that young people needed their space, that I had to learn to take a step back and let them form their own family in their own way. But deep in my heart, something was slowly dying every day. It was as if I were slowly disappearing from my own life, becoming a ghost that haunted the corners of the house that had been my kingdom for so many years. Family meals became silent and uncomfortable. Hope and David talked amongst themselves about their things, about people I did not know, about plans that did not include me. The children ate quickly and went off to play, already used to Grandma being just part of the scenery, like another piece of furniture that had always been there. I tried to start conversations to ask about their days, to share some interesting story, but their answers became shorter and more disinterested. Weekends were especially difficult. Hope and David would go out with the children to visit his parents, to family parties where I was clearly not welcome. "Mommy, we're going to eat at David's parents' house. It's an intimate thing, just the close family," Hope would tell me as she fixed herself in the mirror. I would stay home alone watching TV or reading an old magazine, trying not to think about how lonely I felt in the midst of what was supposed to be my own family. One Sunday afternoon, while they were out on one of their family outings, I decided to deep clean the house to have something to do. In the closet of what had been my room, but was now the kids' room, I found a box full of letters and cards I had saved for years. They were all the notes Hope wrote to me when she was little. "For the best mom in the world. Thank you for taking care of me when I was sick. I love you so much, Mommy." There were dozens of these little tokens of love, each written in her childish handwriting and decorated with drawings of hearts and flowers. I sat on the closet floor and cried for the first time in many years. Where had that little girl who loved me so much gone? At what point had I stopped being important to her? I read every letter. I remembered every occasion she had given them to me. Mother's Day when she was 8 and made me a terrible but love-filled breakfast. My birthday when she was 12 and sang me a song she had learned especially for me. Her high school graduation when she thanked me for all the sacrifices I had made to give her a good education. That same night when they returned from their family outing, I tried to approach Hope to talk. "Honey, could we talk for a moment? I feel like it's been a long time since we really talked," I said, with all the sweetness I could gather. She looked at me with that annoyed expression I had come to know so well. "Mommy, I'm very tired. The kids were very naughty today and I have to get their clothes ready for tomorrow. Can it be another day?" Of course that other day never came. There was always something more important to do. There was always a reason to postpone any real conversation between us. David, for his part, had become increasingly direct in his coldness toward me. He no longer bothered to feign politeness or respect. "Grace, could you not use the washing machine in the morning? The noise wakes up the kids," he would tell me without even looking at me. "Oh, Grace, we need you to not cook in the afternoons because Hope wants the kids to get used to her cooking only." Every request was really a disguised order. Every suggestion was a way of making me feel like an intruder in my own home. The final straw came 3 months ago at a family dinner where I finally understood what my real place was in this new dynamic. Peter had made a drawing at school about his family. With all the innocence of his 5 years, he showed it to me proudly. "Look, Grandma, I drew my family." On the paper were his dad, his mom, his sister, and himself, all holding hands in front of a nice house. I was nowhere to be seen. "And where is Grandma, my love?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "Oh, it's because my teacher said to draw the family that lives in our house," he replied without any malice. Hope and David exchanged a look that did not go unnoticed by me. It was a look of complicity, as if they had been waiting for exactly this moment to make clear a truth I had been denying for years. I was no longer considered part of their nuclear family. I was the grandmother, yes, but a grandmother who lived with them out of convenience, not out of love or a genuine desire to have me close. That night, after everyone went to sleep, I sat in the kitchen drinking a chamomile tea and thinking about everything I had lost without realizing it. It had not been a sudden dramatic change. It had been a slow, steady erosion of my place in my own daughter's heart. Every day that passed, I was a little less important, a little less necessary, a little less loved, and the most painful part of it all was that I had allowed it to happen, believing it was what a good mother should do. Step aside so her children could build their own lives. But now, sitting in my new apartment, looking at these photographs from the past, I realized something very important. I did not step aside out of love. I stepped aside out of fear. Fear of being seen as a meddling mother, in law. Fear of being accused of not knowing when to retreat. Fear of losing my daughter completely if I did not accept the conditions she and David had set to keep me in their lives. For all these years, I convinced myself that it was better to have a little bit of hope than none of her at all. Better to be tolerated than to be completely rejected. Better to be ignored than to be expelled. But in the end, I was expelled anyway. After years of making myself smaller, taking up less space, asking for less attention, needing less love, I still ended up being seen as a burden that had to be removed. Last night, as I washed the few dishes I had used for dinner, I remembered all the times I washed mountains of dishes after family parties at my house, parties where I cooked for days on end, where I cleaned until late at night after everyone had gone to sleep happy and satisfied. I remembered all the nights I stayed awake taking care of my grandchildren when they were sick, all the times I made them their favorite food when Hope was too busy, all the occasions when I was the one who dried their tears when they had nightmares or got hurt playing. Where did all those memories go when Hope decided I was a weight in her life? How could she so easily forget all the years I was her refuge, her comfort, her unconditional support? At what point did my love become a burden and my presence an obstacle to her happiness? This morning, as I was quietly drinking my coffee in my small kitchen, the phone rang. It was a number I did not recognize, so I did not answer. Then it rang again. And again. I finally decided to answer, and it was the voice of Lucy, my 7-year-old granddaughter. "Grandma, is that you?" she asked, with that little voice that always melted my heart. For a moment, my first instinct was to melt again, to respond with all the love I had always felt for her. But then I remembered that Hope had taught me that love is not always returned, that affection is not always valued, that grandmothers can be easily replaced when mothers-in-law who contribute money arrive. "Hello, Lucy," I replied, with a calm that surprised even me. "How did you get my number?" I asked my Uncle Charles for it when he came to visit. "Grandma, why did you leave without saying goodbye? Mom says you went to live with other relatives, but I know you're mad at us," she said with that brutal honesty only children have. For a moment, I was tempted to explain the whole truth to her, to tell her how her mom had kicked me out, to give my room to the grandmother who paid rent. But Lucy is only 7 years old, and she is not responsible for the cruel decisions of adults. "I'm not mad at you or Peter, my love. I just decided it was time for Grandma to have her own little house," I explained with all the gentleness I could. "But I miss you so much, Grandma. Can we come visit you? Can we come see your new house?" Her question broke my heart into pieces, but it also filled me with a determination I had not felt in years. These children are not to blame for their parents' decisions, but I am also not going to let them be used to fill the emotional voids that Hope and David have created with their misguided priorities. "Lucy, when you're a little older and can make your own decisions about who you want to visit, I'll be here waiting for you," I told her firmly but kindly. "But for now, you have to talk to your mom and dad about these things." I heard her sad sigh before she hung up, and I stood with the phone in my hand for many minutes, feeling a deep pain but also a strange sense of freedom. For the first time in years, I am not being manipulated by the emotional needs of others. I am not being used as the convenient grandmother who appears when needed but disappears when she's in the way. I am not being kept in constant uncertainty about my place in the family, always wondering if today I will be loved or tolerated, if today I will be included or ignored. This afternoon, I am going to sign up for those painting classes I saw advertised at the community center. Tomorrow, I am going to get to know the neighborhood market and find out which are the best stalls to buy fresh vegetables. This weekend, I am going to explore the city parks and find the perfect spot to sit and read in the afternoons. I am going to build a new life that is completely mine, where no one makes me feel as if my presence is a favor they are doing for me. Hope wanted me to disappear from her perfect life. She never imagined that disappearing could be exactly what I needed to find myself again. This morning I woke up with a mental clarity I had not felt in many, many years. It was not a dramatic revelation or a sudden moment of enlightenment. It was more like a thick fog that had been clouding my thoughts for years had finally lifted, letting me see with perfect clarity what I had to do. As I prepared my morning coffee in my small kitchen, I remembered the exact words Michael had said to me before he passed. Grace, if you ever need total protection, use everything I left you. Don't be afraid to defend yourself, my love. Sometimes people only understand when they lose what they took for granted. At that moment, I understood that Michael had not just left me money saved in the bank. He had left me the tools to reclaim my dignity if my own family ever decided to trample on it. My husband knew David's character very well ever since he started dating Hope. That boy has ambitious eyes. He had told me once after a family dinner. Be careful, Grace. People like that are always calculating what they can gain from every situation. I defended David at the time, thinking Michael was being too hard on our daughter's boyfriend. Now I realize that my husband had seen exactly what I refused to see for all these years. After having a quiet breakfast, I got dressed in my best clothes and went downtown with a very clear purpose in mind. My first stop was at the office of Mr. Raymond Morris, the lawyer the bank manager had recommended when I sold the house. He is a man in his 50s, very professional, but also very understanding of complicated family situations. Grace, it's great to see you again. How can I help you today? He asked me with that warm smile that had reassured me so much when I sold the house. Mr. Morris, I need your help with some additional legal matters. I want to make sure that certain decisions I made are completely irreversible. I explained as I took out a folder with documents I had been organizing all week. For the next 2 hours, we meticulously reviewed every paper, every contract, every legal document related to the sale of the house and the transfer of my assets. The lawyer explained every detail to me with infinite patience, making sure I understood perfectly the implications of every decision I had made. Grace, I want you to know that everything you did was completely legal and legitimate. The house was registered solely in your name. The money from the sale is entirely yours, and no one has any legal right to question these decisions, he confirmed with all seriousness. However, I want to ask if you are completely sure you don't want to leave any doors open for a possible reconciliation with your family. His question made me reflect for a moment, but my answer came out with a firmness that surprised me. Mr. Morris, after years of being treated like a burden in my own home, I am absolutely sure that I do not want to emotionally depend on people who see me as a burden ever again. After the meeting with the lawyer, I walked through the downtown streets, feeling a huge weight lifting off my shoulders. For the first time in many, many years, I had total control over my own life. I did not have to ask permission to use my own kitchen. I did not have to walk quietly so as not to bother anyone. I did not have to hide my feelings to keep the peace in a house where my presence was barely tolerated. It was a strange and wonderful feeling at the same time. The complete freedom to be myself, without having to consider the opinions or comfort of people who had stopped valuing me long ago. My next stop was the bank, where I had an appointment scheduled with the manager to review my investments and plan my financial future. Grace, your finances are in excellent shape, she informed me as she reviewed the numbers on her computer. The money from the sale of the house combined with the savings your husband accumulated for years provides you with very solid economic stability for the rest of your life. It was incredible to think that Michael, working in construction for so many years, had managed to save so much money without me noticing. Your husband was a man who always planned ahead, the manager continued. He left very specific instructions on how to handle these funds in case you needed total independence. I left the bank feeling a security I had not experienced since Michael's death. I no longer depended on the goodwill of my daughter and her husband to have a roof over my head. I no longer had to accept humiliations to maintain my place in a family that had turned me into a second-class citizen. I no longer had to smile and nod when they treated me as if I were a senile old woman with no valid opinions. For the first time in years, I was completely in charge of my own destiny. That afternoon, as I was organizing my new routines in my apartment, the phone rang. It was Hope, and for the first time in weeks, I decided to answer. "Mom, you finally answered. I've been trying to talk to you for days," she said with that voice that tried to sound worried, but which I knew all too well. It was the same voice she used when she wanted something from me, but tried to make me feel guilty for not giving it to her immediately. "Hello, Hope. What do you need?" I replied with a calm that clearly took her by surprise. "Mom? What do you mean, what do I need? I'm your daughter. Can't I just call to see how you are?" She responded with that feigned indignation she had perfected over the years. "Of course you can call, honey. I just wanted to know if there was something specific you needed, because your tone sounds very urgent," I explained with the same calm. There was a long silence on the other end of the line before she finally said what she really wanted to say. "Mom, David and I have been thinking, and we think that maybe we acted a little hastily when we asked you to leave the house." There it was, the emotional manipulation disguised as regret. "Oh, really? And what led you to that conclusion?" I asked with genuine curiosity. "Well, it's just that Doris turned out to be very different from what we expected. She's very demanding, always complaining about something, and the kids haven't adapted well to having her here. Besides, David lost his job last week and things are very tight financially," she explained in a voice that tried to sound vulnerable, but which sounded completely calculating to me. "What a shame that things didn't turn out as you expected," I replied, without showing any particular emotion. "Mom, don't you understand what I'm telling you? We need you back. The children ask about you every day. The house isn't the same without you. And we realize we made a huge mistake." She continued with what was clearly a carefully prepared speech. For a moment, my mother's heart wanted to believe that they had finally understood the value of what they had lost. I wanted to believe that they truly missed me for who I was, not just for what I could do for them. But then I remembered the exact words Hope had said to me when she kicked me out. "You just spend money and contribute nothing." I remembered the coldness in her eyes when she told me there was no turning back. I remembered years of being treated like a stranger in my own home. "Hope, I'm very glad to know that you finally value what you had," I said with a sweetness I did not feel. "But I have already made very important decisions about my future, and I am very happy with my new life." "How can you be happy living alone in a small apartment when you could be here with your family?" she asked, with that voice that clearly could not understand how someone could prefer solitude to the company of family who had treated her so badly. "Hope, my apartment may be small, but it is completely mine. Here, nobody tells me when I can use the kitchen, when I can watch TV, or when my presence is convenient or inconvenient. Here I am a whole person, not just the grandmother who appears when help is needed and disappears when she's in the way," I explained with a clarity that clearly annoyed her. "Mom, don't be so dramatic. We never treated you the way you say we did," she replied, with that indignation she always used when someone pointed out behaviors she did not want to acknowledge. "Hope, do you remember exactly what you said to me when you kicked me out of the house?" I asked her directly. There was another long silence before she answered. "We were going through a very stressful situation. David had been under a lot of pressure at work. Doris was pressuring us to take her in. The expenses were very high. It was nothing personal against you. It was nothing personal to tell me that I only spent money and contributed nothing. It was nothing personal to kick me out to give my room to someone who did pay rent. It was nothing personal to lie to the neighbors about where I was, so you wouldn't have to admit you had thrown out your own mother," I asked with a firmness I had never used with her before. "Mom, I already apologize. What more do you want me to do? Are you going to punish us forever for a mistake we've already acknowledged?" she replied with that victim voice she had learned to use so well over the years. "Hope, I'm not punishing anyone. I am simply living my life according to the lessons you taught me. You taught me that I am a burden, so I decided not to be a burden to anyone ever again. You taught me that my contribution was not valued, so I decided to contribute only to my own happiness. You taught me that my place in the family was conditional, so I decided to create my own family of people who value me unconditionally." The silence that followed was so long I thought she had hung up. Finally, I heard her voice, but she was no longer trying to sound sweet or repentant. "Mom, if that's your decision, we hope you'll be very happy with your new life, but don't expect us to keep begging you forever," she said with a coldness that reminded me exactly why I had made the decisions I had. "Hope, I never asked you to beg me. I also don't ask you to understand my decisions. I only ask that you respect them exactly as I respected the decision you made to kick me out of my own home," I replied with the same coldness. "I hope you find a way to solve your financial and family problems without depending on people you consider a burden." After hanging up, I sat in my small living room processing the whole conversation. I realized that Hope had confirmed exactly what I suspected. They did not need me. They needed what I could do for them. They did not miss my company. They missed my financial contribution. They did not value my love. They valued my utility. It was a painful but necessary confirmation that I had made the right decisions. That night, as I prepared a simple but delicious dinner just for myself, I reflected on all the changes that had happened in my life over the past few weeks. For the first time in years, I was not cooking for people who ate without gratitude. I was not cleaning up messes that others had made without consideration. I was not living according to schedules and rules set by people who saw me as a necessary inconvenience. The next day, I got up early and went to the community center to finally sign up for the painting classes I had been putting off. The receptionist, a very kind lady named Rose, gave me all the information I needed. Grace, you're going to see that these classes are wonderful. We have many ladies your age who have discovered artistic talents they never knew they had, she told me with great enthusiasm. Besides, the group that forms here is like a small family. Everyone supports and takes care of each other. The word family no longer caused me the painful nostalgia I had felt for so many years. Now I understood that true family is not defined by blood or surnames, but by mutual respect, genuine affection, and consideration for others' feelings. If these ladies at the community center could offer me more understanding and support than my own daughter, then they would be my chosen family. Over the next week, I established completely new routines for my life. I woke up when I wanted, ate whatever I felt like for breakfast, went for walks in the city parks without having to explain to anyone where I was going or when I would be back. In the afternoons, I read books I had wanted to read for years but never had time to enjoy because there was always someone who needed something from me. The phone rang occasionally. Sometimes it was Hope trying different strategies to convince me to come back. First, she tried guilt. Mom, the kids cry for you every night. Then she tried pity. Mom, David is very depressed since he lost his job. Then she tried emotional blackmail. Mom, if you don't come back, the kids are going to grow up thinking their grandmother doesn't love them. Each call confirmed more and more that I had made the right decision. Hope continued to see our relationship as a transaction where she set the terms, and I had to accept them to maintain my place in her life. She had not understood that a truly loving relationship requires mutual respect, not just mutual need. 3 weeks after Hope's first call, I received an unexpected visit. It was Charles, my eldest son, who had traveled from Ohio specifically to talk to me. When I opened the door and saw him standing there with his serious, worried face, I felt a pang of hope that maybe he had understood what really happened. Mom, we need to talk, he said as he entered my small apartment and looked around with an expression I could not quite decipher. Of course, honey. Do you want some coffee? I offered with the hospitality that had always been part of my nature. As I prepared coffee for both of us, he sat in my small living room and remained silent, clearly organizing his thoughts. Mom, Hope told me everything that happened, he finally began. She told me there was a misunderstanding, that you had an argument, and that you decided to leave the house because you felt offended. I immediately realized that Hope had given him her edited version of events, a version where she was the misunderstood victim, and I was the dramatic mother who had overreacted to a normal situation. Charles, did she tell you exactly what she said to me when she kicked me out of the house? I asked him directly. He looked uncomfortable, clearly not expecting me to be so direct. She said there were harsh words on both sides, that tempers were high, and that maybe things got out of control. He replied with that diplomacy he had always used to avoid family confrontations. I then told him word for word exactly what had happened. I explained about Doris arriving to take over my room because she paid rent. I told him about the years of being treated like a maid in my own home. I described the gradual coldness that had grown to the point where my presence was barely tolerated. Charles listened to me in silence, and I could see in his face that he was finally understanding the magnitude of what had really occurred. Mom, I didn't know things had gotten that far, he said finally, with a very soft voice. Hope had always told me you were very comfortable living with them, that it was an arrangement that worked well for everyone. Charles, your sister told you what she wanted you to believe, so she wouldn't have to admit how she had been treating me for years. I explained with a deep sadness, but also with total clarity. But why did you sell the house, Mom? That really seems like a very extreme reaction to me, he asked, with genuine confusion. Charles, after being kicked out of my own home as if I were a stranger after years of being treated like a burden, what guarantee did I have that the same thing wouldn't happen again? If I decided to go back, how could I be sure I wouldn't be kicked out again the next time it was convenient for them? My answer left him speechless because he finally understood the flawless logic of my decisions. I had not sold the house out of revenge or resentment. I had sold it to ensure my total independence and to never again depend on the goodwill of people who had shown that their goodwill had very clear limits. Charles sat in silence for long minutes after hearing the whole truth about what had really happened between Hope and me. I could see in his face how he processed every detail, how the pieces of the puzzle finally fit together to form a completely different picture from the one his sister had painted for him. "Mom, I really didn't know any of this," he finally said, his voice broken with guilt. "If I had known how they were treating you, I would have intervened immediately. Charles, honey, you have your own family to take care of in Ohio. It wasn't your responsibility to monitor how your sister treated me in my own home," I replied with all the understanding in the world. Besides, Hope became very skilled at showing one face when there were visitors and a very different one when we were alone. Charles nodded sadly, acknowledging the truth in my words. For all these years when he came to visit Hope, always made sure everything seemed harmonious and happy. The tensions, the humiliations, the subtle slights, all of that was carefully hidden during family visits. "But Mom, don't you think selling the house was too drastic? Maybe you could have talked. You could have reached a different agreement." Charles insisted, clearly struggling with the idea that things had reached a point of no return. "Charles, for years I tried to talk to your sister. I tried to express my feelings, my needs, my desires, to continue being an important part of the family. Every time I tried, I was ignored, minimized, or directly dismissed." I explained with infinite patience. "Your sister had made it very clear to me that I was a weight in her life, that my presence was an inconvenience they had to tolerate out of family obligation. When someone tells you that with such clarity, the only dignified thing you can do is believe them and act accordingly." I continued as I poured more coffee for both of us. "Selling the house was not revenge. It was liberation. It was the only way to ensure I would never again depend on the goodwill of people who had proven that their goodwill had very specific limits." Charles leaned back in his chair, visibly overwhelmed by everything he was hearing. "Mom, Hope is desperate. She called me crying, telling me you don't answer her calls, that you want nothing to do with the family, that the grandchildren ask about their grandmother every day. Charles, I have not closed the door to a relationship with my grandchildren, but I am not going to allow them to be used as emotional tools to manipulate me into returning to a situation where I was not respected," I clarified firmly. "When Lucy and Peter are old enough to understand the decisions of adults, when they can form their own opinions about family relationships, I will be here for them. But I will not participate in this game where I am the convenient grandmother when help is needed and the bothersome grandmother when nothing is needed," I added, with a determination that clearly surprised my son. At that moment, the phone rang. Charles and I looked at each other, and we both knew who it was before I even answered. "Mom, is Charles there with you?" Hope asked without even saying hello. "Yes, he's here," I replied simply. "Can you put him on? I need to talk to him urgently," she asked with that voice I knew so well when she wanted something specific. I handed the phone to Charles, who answered cautiously. "Hello, Hope." From where I was sitting, I could perfectly hear my daughter's desperate voice on the other end of the line. "Charles, you have to help me convince Mom to come back. Things here are terrible. David is still out of work. Doris is a living hell who complains about everything constantly. The kids are confused and sad, and I can't handle all of this alone." Charles looked at me as he listened to his sister, and I could see in his eyes that he finally understood the situation completely. "Hope, did you tell Mom she was a burden and that she had to leave so Doris could have her room?" he asked her directly. There was a long silence before Hope answered. "Charles, things were very tense. There was a lot of financial pressure. Doris was pressuring us. It wasn't as simple as it sounds." "Hope, yes or no? Did you tell Mom she was a burden?" Charles insisted with a firmness I hadn't heard from him since he was a teenager. "Well, yes, but I was very stressed. I didn't mean it. It was in a moment of high tension." Hope stammered clearly, realizing her excuses weren't going to work on her brother as they had before. "Hope, Mom just told me the real story of what happened. Not just that day, but for years. Do you know she told me you treated her like a maid in her own house?" Charles continued, his voice growing firmer. "Do you know she told me that for years you made decisions about her house without consulting her, that you ignored her at family dinners, that you excluded her from family activities?" "Charles, those are exaggerations. Mom has always been very dramatic, you know that. She interprets things in a very extreme way," Hope replied, with that tactic she had always used, discrediting others' feelings by calling them dramatic or exaggerated. But this time, it didn't work. Hope, I've known Mom for 40 years. In my entire life, I have never seen her be dramatic or exaggerate about anything. If she says you treated her badly, it's because you treated her badly, Charles told her with total conviction. And frankly, after hearing the whole story, it seems to me that Mom made the right decisions to protect her dignity. The silence that followed was so long we thought Hope had hung up. Finally, we heard her voice, but it no longer sounded desperate or manipulative. It sounded defeated. Charles, what am I supposed to do now? David can't find a job. Doris is impossible to live with. I don't have money to rent another place, and the kids really miss their grandmother. Hope, those are problems that you and David created when you decided to kick Mom out to please Doris. They are problems that you two are going to have to solve without using Mom as the convenient solution. Charles replied with a harshness that pleasantly surprised me. Mom is not responsible for fixing the mess you two made of your lives. But Charles, she's our mother. Family is supposed to support each other in difficult times. Hope appealed, using the family values she herself had trampled on when she kicked me out of the house. You're right, Hope. Family is supposed to support each other. But you decided Mom wasn't family when you kicked her out. You can't now claim the benefits of being family after you rejected the responsibilities of being family, Charles explained with flawless logic. After Charles hung up, we sat in silence for a long time. Finally, he looked at me with an expression of deep sadness mixed with pride. Mom, I am so sorry I wasn't here to protect you from all of this. I'm sorry I believed Hope's version without questioning it. And above all, I'm sorry you had to go through all of this alone. Charles, honey, you have nothing to apologize for. You have always been a good son. You've kept in touch. You've come to visit me when you could. You have always treated me with respect and affection, I said, taking his hands in mine. What happened with Hope is not a reflection of how I raised you two. Sometimes people change. Sometimes outside influences lead them down paths one never expected. Mom, I want you to know that Patricia and I would be delighted to have you in Ohio if you ever want to move closer to us. We have a guest cottage in the backyard that we could fix up especially for you, he offered with genuine sincerity. His offer touched me deeply, but it also made me smile. Charles, I appreciate the offer so much, and it gives me enormous peace to know I have that option if I ever need it. But for the first time in years, I am building a life that is completely mine. I am discovering who I am when I don't have to be the convenient mother, the useful grandmother, or the accommodating mother. In law, I explained, looking out the window of my small apartment. I'm learning to paint watercolors. I've made new friends at the community center. I walk in the parks every afternoon. I read the books I always wanted to read. For the first time in decades, my time is completely mine. My decisions are completely mine. My peace is completely mine. I continued with a smile that came from the bottom of my heart. Charles nodded with understanding. Mom, I see you more peaceful and happier than I've seen you in years. It's like you've reclaimed a part of yourself that you had lost. Exactly, honey. I had lost my own identity, trying to be what others needed me to be. Now, I am rediscovering who Grace is when she doesn't have to meet anyone else's expectations. That afternoon, after Charles left to return to Ohio, I received another call. This time it was David, which surprised me, because in all the years he had lived in my house, he had never initiated a phone conversation with me. Grace, I need to talk to you, he said in a voice that was trying to sound humble, but I could tell it was taking a lot of effort. Go ahead, David, I replied politely but without warmth. Grace, I know things got out of control. I know we said things that hurt you, and we want to fix things. Hope has been in a very bad way since you left, and I realize we made some very big mistakes, he told me in what was clearly a prepared speech. David, I'm glad to know you finally realize you made mistakes. That is the first step to growing as people, I replied without committing to anything. Grace, would there be any way we could talk in person? Maybe if we all sat down together we could find a solution that works for everyone, he proposed in that voice that tried to sound reasonable. David, a solution that worked for everyone would have been to treat me with respect and consideration from the beginning. A solution that worked for everyone would have been to value my contribution to the family instead of seeing me as a burden. A solution that worked for everyone would have been to include me in the decisions that affected my own home instead of treating me like an unwanted tenant, I explained with a calm he clearly did not expect. But Grace, we did value you. Maybe we didn't express it well. Maybe we weren't clear enough about it, but you were always important to us. He tried to argue with a logic that fell apart in the face of the facts. David, actions speak louder than words, and your actions for years told me very clearly what my place was in your family. Grace Doris is gone. She didn't even last 2 months here. She complained constantly. She criticized everything we did. She demanded constant attention. The kids hated her. Hope was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. And I realized what we had lost when we kicked you out, he confessed with an honesty that surprised me. How interesting, David. So Doris turned out to be exactly the kind of person you thought I was, I asked with a soft but sharp irony. No, Grace, that's not. You were never like that. You were always, he stammered clearly, realizing the logical trap he had fallen into. David, let me explain something very important to you. I was never a burden in that house. I contributed financially more than you knew. I contributed with domestic work more than you acknowledged. And I contributed with love and care more than you valued. The difference between Doris and me is not that she is more difficult. The difference is that you treated the wrong person badly, I explained with a clarity that left him speechless. Grace, what would we have to do for you to consider coming back? What conditions would we need to meet? He asked with what was clearly poorly disguised desperation. His question made me laugh, not with cruelty, but with a freedom I hadn't felt in years. David, that question proves you still don't understand what really happened here. This isn't about conditions or negotiations. It's about basic respect and genuine love, things that cannot be demanded or bought, I explained patiently. You showed me for years that you saw me as a convenience, not as a person valuable in her own right. Now that you missed that convenience, you want to negotiate to get it back. But people can change, Grace. We can learn from our mistakes and be better. He insisted with a hope that I pitied, but that was not going to change my decision. David, people can change, but only when they truly understand the damage they have caused and when they are willing to do the internal work necessary to be different. So far, all I have heard from you are excuses and justifications. What do you mean by that? He asked with genuine confusion. David, at no point have I heard Hope or you say, Grace, we treated you badly, we hurt you deeply, we understand exactly why you felt humiliated and rejected, and we take full responsibility for our actions. Instead, I've heard, we were stressed, the circumstances were difficult, you're exaggerating. It was a misunderstanding. The silence that followed was long and heavy. Finally, David spoke in a very small voice. Grace, we treated you badly, we hurt you deeply, we understand why you felt humiliated and rejected, and we take full responsibility for our actions. His words sounded sincere, but they came far too late. David, I appreciate that you can finally say those words. It is an important step for your personal growth, but acknowledging the damage you caused does not automatically erase the consequences of that damage, I explained, gently but firmly. I made decisions to protect my dignity and my emotional well-being. Those decisions are not going to change just because you are sorry now. So you're never going to forgive us. Are we never going to have another chance to be a family? He asked, with a sadness that moved me but was not going to change my path. David, I have already forgiven you. Forgiveness is something I did for my own peace of mind, not as a gift to you. But forgiving does not mean forgetting, and it definitely does not mean returning to a situation that hurt me. You can be a perfectly good family without me. In fact, it's clear that's what you wanted when you kicked me out. Now you have the opportunity to build exactly the family you wanted without the burden that my presence represented. I continued with a serenity that surprised me. That night after hanging up with David, I sat on my small balcony with a cup of chamomile tea and looked at the stars over my new city. For the first time in years, I did not feel the weight of family expectations. I did not feel the pressure to be what others needed me to be. I did not feel the constant anxiety of walking on eggshells so as not to bother anyone. Tomorrow, I will start my second week of painting classes. The day after tomorrow, I have a date with Rose, my new friend from the community center, to go to the craft market together. On the weekend, I will explore a new park on the other side of the city. My life is small, but it is completely mine, and that difference changes everything. Hope and David finally learned a lesson I had been trying to teach them for years without realizing it, that valuable people cannot be taken for granted, that love and respect are not infinite resources that will always be available no matter how you treat them, that some decisions once made change things forever. They wanted a family without the inconvenience of respecting all its members. Now they have it. 6 months after that last conversation with David, I am sitting on the small terrace of my apartment, drinking my morning coffee while I watch the sun light up the park where I walk every afternoon. The view from here is truly beautiful, and I can see other people like me who have learned that family isn't always what you expect it to be, but that life can be just as rich and full without those broken expectations. This morning I found a letter under my door. It was from Hope, written in shaky handwriting and stained with dried tears. It was full of desperate apologies and pleas for me to reconsider my decision. She told me that David had finally found a job, but the salary was much lower than his previous one, that they had to move to a smaller apartment because they could no longer afford the rent on a large house, that Doris had gone back to her sister's house after causing problems in every family that had taken her in. I read the entire letter carefully, folded it neatly, and put it in a special box where I collect things that no longer have any real importance in my new life. I don't feel satisfaction from their difficulties, but I also feel no need to rescue them from the consequences of their own decisions. My phone rings occasionally during the week. Sometimes it's Hope, sometimes it's David, and one time it was even Doris asking if I would be willing to mediate between her and David so they would take her back. I listen to the phone ring until it stops completely, and then I calmly return to my daily activities. I have learned that not all calls deserve to be answered, especially when they come from people who only remember you when they need something. In my painting class, I have discovered a talent I never knew I had. My watercolor landscapes have improved so much that the teacher, Mrs. Linda, has suggested I consider participating in the exhibition the community center organizes every year. Grace, you have a natural eye for capturing tranquility in your paintings. You can tell you paint from a place of inner peace, she told me last week while observing my latest work. Rose, my friend from the community center, invited me to accompany her to visit her son in Florida next month. Grace, my daughter-in-law, always asks about you. She says she loves how you talk about your independence with such serenity. She thinks you could be a good influence for her mom, who is going through a similar situation with her other kids. She told me while we watered the plants together in the community garden we've started at the center. It's funny how life presents you with new families when you least expect it. These ladies I've met in my activities understand perfectly what it means to be devalued by your own children, what it means to have to choose between your dignity and family convenience. We support each other without judgment, without competition, without expecting anything more than genuine company and mutual respect. Yesterday, while organizing my few but valuable belongings, I found an old photograph of when Hope was 15. We were in the kitchen. She was helping me make tamales for Christmas, both of us smiling with our hands full of dough. I looked at it for a long time, remembering that young girl who used to tell me that when she grew up, she wanted to be exactly like me. I wonder at what point that admiration turned into resentment, at what point my love became a burden to her. I put the photograph in my personal album, not in the box of unimportant things, because even though Hope chose a path that separated us forever, that girl in the picture did love me genuinely, and I choose to remember that love without letting it force me to accept the lack of love that came later. This afternoon, as I was walking through my favorite park, I ran into Anthony, my old neighbor. Grace, how wonderful to see you here. You look very well, very peaceful. He greeted me with that warm smile I had always appreciated. I told him briefly about my new life, about my painting classes, about the friendships I've formed. I'm so glad to know you're doing so well, Grace. To be honest, after seeing all the drama that happened when you sold the house, I thought you would be very sad, but you look happier than ever. Anthony, sometimes the most difficult decisions are the ones that bring us the most peace, I replied as we sat on a bench under the shade of a large tree. And how are things back in the old neighborhood? I asked more out of politeness than genuine curiosity. Oh, Grace, what can I tell you? The family that bought your house is very nice, but I heard through the grapevine that Hope and David had to move to a much smaller place. The kids look sad when I see them on the street. His words caused me a pang of pain, not for Hope or David, but for Lucy and Peter. They are the innocent victims of their parents' selfish decisions. But I also understand that my responsibility is not to rescue my grandchildren from the consequences of their parents' choices. My responsibility was to take care of my own dignity and well-being, and that is exactly what I did. The children will adapt Anthony. They are strong and have parents who, although they made terrible mistakes with me, love them very much. They will learn important lessons about how to treat the people you love, I said with a serene conviction. And when they are older, if they want to find me, I will be here. But it will be their decision, not an obligation imposed by adults who did not know how to value what they had. Tonight before sleeping, I looked out my window at the stars shining over my new city. Michael, if you are watching me from heaven, I want you to know that I used all the gifts you left me well, not just the money you saved with such care, but also the lessons about personal dignity you taught me during our years together. Thank you for preparing my independence before you left. Thank you for teaching me that true love also means protecting the person you love so they can defend themselves. Hope thought she was punishing me by kicking me out of the house. What she did not know was that she was giving me the freedom I had not dared to take for myself. Sometimes the best blessings come disguised as the most painful betrayals. Sometimes the rejection from those we expect to love us opens the door to those who truly know how to love. Tomorrow I will start a new painting, a sunrise over the park where I have found so much peace. It will be my way of celebrating this new life I have built from scratch. This life where no one makes me feel as if my existence is a favor they are doing for me. At 68, I finally learned that sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is the absence of people who do not know how to value you. Sometimes the greatest new beginning is exactly the silence you choose to keep forever. Elderly Stories is curious to know how far this story reached. Where are you watching from? Comment below.